Coda. The Oracle always knew when the children were about to visit. She could hear their enthusiasm half a mile away. She shut the hefty book that she'd been studying, pushed it back in place on the shelf, and looked around the little library. She was all set for the day's appointments.
Grandma! Grandma!
Her grandchildren jostled through the open door and ran towards her, each carrying a bunch of orange and purple flowers.
Grandma, we picked these for you,
said a girl with a ring of ridges circling the top of her head.
Flowers,
said her little brother proudly, his bright eyes shaded by the leaf-like twists emerging from his forehead. The Oracle gladly took the blooms from the children.
Wild Aranthums,
she said.
My favourite. We know,
said the girl.
Mummy told us. They've got the best smell, and did you know they are the best flowers for honey beetles? That's where we get purple honey from. That's fascinating, isn't it?
Said the Oracle with pride. A tired young woman entered the library. A striking fan of delicate fins arched across her head. She approached the Oracle and kissed her on the cheek.
Hello, Mum. Goodness, you don't know what it's like trying to keep up with these two. Oh, I do, Azima,
said the Oracle.
You were just the same. Interested in everything, as it should be.
Azima affectionately patted the children's shoulders.
They insisted on bringing you flowers on the way to school, but now we're very late, so we need to hurry. Come on, we'll see Grandma tomorrow.
The children said their goodbyes as Azima cajoled them out through the door. Then, almost as an afterthought, she turned back.
Mum, did you know there's somebody waiting outside? Oh, is there?
Said the Oracle. It was still a little early for the first consultation.
Yes, I don't recognise him, and he seems a bit nervous. I'll deal with it, darling,
said the Oracle.
You head on.
Azima nodded and rushed off to catch up with her children. The Oracle supposed she could fit in an extra appointment. She checked herself in a mirror, smoothed down her tunic, stroked the finger-like petals on her cranium that age and study had twisted into a solid cone, and stepped outside. The warm sun was slowly lifting into the pure turquoise sky. It was a perfect day on Islos. Not far from the library door stood a strange blue box in the middle of the street. Standing in front of it was a young humanoid man with floppy hair, wearing a purple coat, braces, and a bow tie. He was dithering, as if having a discussion in his head, until he spotted her and jumped in surprise.
Oh, I wasn't expecting you to come out.
He squinted and smiled.
Pashal. It is Pashal, isn't it?
The Oracle regarded him with curiosity.
I am Pashal, Oracle of Islos. Do I know you, sir? Not exactly, but I'm so glad I've found you,
he said.
You met a friend of mine once, and parted badly. I wanted to talk to you about him. The doctor.
Pashal's face hardened.
The doctor? That was more than 30 years ago. Why would I ever want to talk about the doctor, or speak to one of his friends?
The young man hesitated for a second, lost in thought.
Then, on the honest basis that I'm not really his friend, could I have a quick word? You see, it's taken me a lot of effort to find a way back to Islos, and I can't stay long.
Pashal didn't want to admit it, but this stranger had her attention. He was charming, possibly mad, or perhaps both, but she supposed that everyone had a right to an audience with the Oracle.
Come this way,
she said. The young man nodded enthusiastically and followed her inside. Pashal poured them some tea, and they sat on opposite sides of her desk, surrounded by books. The young man gazed around the room.
You've gone full analog,
he said.
The digital archive is in the basement, but I like the solid look of bookshelves. Me too, he said. Can't beat a good shelf. Great for putting things on.
She sipped her tea quietly. The young man seemed lost for the right words, and grasped for something to say.
Those children, they're yours? No, they're my grandchildren, from my daughter. Of course, of course. I get confused with families. They're very complicated where I'm from. So, do you and young Wim get together?
The mention of Wim with such a familiar tone surprised her. Why had the doctor told him so much?
No, we absolutely didn't,
she said, amused.
But when we dropped you off... We?
Pashal's eyes widened.
I mean, he.
Pashal smiled at the young man's fluster. This strange fellow knew so much, but so little at the same time.
I sent a message out to as many worlds as I could. Even visited some. There were survivors, and many came to join us here. We couldn't return to Magnox. It was sterile. And the cities had been levelled by opportunistic marauders like the Vanith. Islos is a good planet. We have a 300-strong community of Magnoxans now. Wim found himself, and within a year of our arrival, settled down with an alien from Helicon Alpha. They run a local bar together and have a dozen lovely children.
The young man looked saddened.
The doctor was sorry he couldn't have saved more of your people.
But Pashal was long tired of people's pity.
He said so at the time. But I'm not sure he meant it. Oh, he did. But it was centuries ago now. People forget.
Pashal snorted.
Centuries? Did he find some temporal way of cheating death? No, he didn't. After he left you here, well, things didn't go quite to plan. Enough about the doctor. Let's talk about you. Look at this place. Amazing. You're the Oracle of Islos, giving out knowledge and wisdom to anyone who needs it. You're more worthy than the minds of Magnox ever were. And I remember what happened to them,
said Pashal. She glanced at the clock on the wall, put down the teacup, and stood.
I have my first appointment soon. Of course, I should go.
The young man fished in his pockets as he rose.
I wanted to give you something, an attempt to make amends for your past loss. You see, it seems my final end is approaching on the planet Trenzalore, and although I'm doing my best to avoid it, I can't run forever.
The Oracle felt a sudden déjà vu. She'd heard something similar, said by that Ood creature long ago. The young man delved deeper into his pockets.
You see, I've met so many people, touched so many lives, not always in a good way. And sometimes I forget those people. So I'm making an effort. Aha!
He pulled out a palm-sized data drive from a pocket and offered it to Pashal. It was dirty and had a small crack down one side, but apart from that it was intact. Pashal stared at the drive and found herself taking it without question.
I went back to Magnox,
said the young man.
There wasn't a lot left, but I excavated this from the ruin of the Chronicon. It contains the entire history of the Magnoxan civilization, plus 3% of all knowledge in the Dark Times, which, let's face it, is a huge deal, enough to expand your library 1,000-fold or more.
Pashal was astounded. It was a gift beyond any she'd ever been given.
And you're entrusting this to me?
She asked.
You deserve it more than anyone,
he replied.
Who are you?
She asked.
Tell me. Just an old friend,
he said.
Goodbye, Pashal.
The young man about turned and hurried from the library. Pashal gazed down at the precious data drive and clutched it to her breast. It was overwhelming. Could a day begin any better? But she couldn't leave things like this. She rushed out of the door and into the street. The young man was unlocking the door to the blue box and was about to step inside. What he would do in there, she had no idea. Perhaps he was crazy after all. But then, perhaps, he was just extraordinary.
Thank you, Doctor,
she called. The young man smiled, nodded, and stepped into the box. Within a few seconds, the light on top began to flash, and she heard a strange noise emanating from inside. Before her eyes, the blue box faded away forever, to be replaced by a wonderful new memory.
Don't forget to click below and subscribe to the official Doctor Who YouTube channel.